going.
Just first tell us your name.
Darlene Bohr.
And
Mrs. George.
Mrs. George Bohr. And who did you know that was in the Korean War?
My husband, George.
Were you married at the time?
No.
You weren't?
Got married right when he came home.
Where were you, or do you remember when Grandpa told you that he was going to be going to Korea?
Well, I had met him a year before, and at that time, you didn't enlist, you were drafted. So he got his notice the end of the year, and then he left right about 30 days after he got his draft notice. So,
did he ever tell you what, like, some of the things he saw?
he wasn't in any actual fighting, but he was on the 39th parallel, which was the division between North and South Korea, and that was what the war was about, because they were trying to invade from the north down into the south. So the United States went to help the South Koreans, and then they stationed their troops all along this line. So there was constantly shooting and everything. You know, you never knew what was going to happen or when they were going to try something new, even though they had signed that it was supposed to be over a treaty.
Did you keep in contact with him when he was
Oh,
on?
every night I wrote him a letter, and he wrote as often as he could, which was pretty often.
How did your everyday life change while he was gone?
Well, at that time, women didn't have cars and everything and didn't drive like they do now. So I went to work, took the bus to work, and whatever I did, you'd stay downtown St. Paul and do, like, I was on a bowling team, you went to movies and everything, and then took the bus back home, because you didn't have, unless, you know, there was somebody there with a car, which couldn't be any other man, because Grandpa would have had a fit. But anyway, so there wasn't much going on, and he called, you know, whenever he could, when he was still in the United States at his training, which was in Indiana. So he got to go on weekends to the Indy 500 a lot, you know, on weekends and everything. And then he went out to California, and he went across on a ship, which took, I think it was 2 weeks it took him to get there. And everybody was seasick. And you wanted to always have the top bunk, he said, because everybody was thrown up. You didn't want to be down below, because everybody, and they had the big trash cans on the decks, and he said they were always full of people, their heads down in them. They were sick all the whole way over, you know.
How long was he in Indiana for, training?
It was from January through June, and then when he came home, he gave me my diamond.
Oh, okay. What branch was he in?
Army. And he started out as a private, and came home as a sergeant.
Did he ever suffer from any post-war depression or mental
I don't
illness?
think so. I don't remember. No.
No? Okay.
He was so glad to be home. He was just happy.
Did he have, like, any changed personality, or
He grew up.
he
Grew up a lot. Sure, you mature when you're in the service like that. And it was 2 years, you know, he was gone, and he was 2 years older. I mean, he was only 20 and I was 19. So, you know, he wasn't, you know, a lot of growing up in 2 years.
How long was he gone? Or 2 months?
2 years.
What was his unit and job?
He was, he got to be a sergeant, so he had men under him. And they lived in tents in Korea, and their weather was just like ours in the winter, so it was really cold. And they didn't have any electricity, and I remember him saying that they had, down the middle of this long tent was sand, and in that sand they had a stove, which it was very, where they could have fires very easily, you know. So the sand was around, and they did have a fire one night, and the tent burned. But I used to have to send him candles because they had no electricity or anything, and he'd be writing his letters with my candlelight in the tent.
What?
But what he did say was, though, and I gave you that book about Dear John, and they had the movie Dear John. Dear John letters were when the girl back home would write and say she'd found somebody else. And he did have somebody in his unit when he was a sergeant that put his gun in his mouth and shot himself after after one of the Dear John letters, yeah. And he said these kids, had never been away from home, especially kids from farms and stuff. They'd never even been to the Twin Cities. And they were so lonesome, he said at night, you just hear sobbing. Yeah, it breaks your heart.
Did you send him any other things besides candles?
Oh, yes, socks, and his feet were always cold when they got back at night. They'd be on duty, in the snow and everything. And I don't think we were really prepared for this war, because when he came home from boot camp, he only had 2 pairs of socks, Army, khaki ones, and they both had holes in them. And they had no more socks to issue him. And so I remember I had to learn how to darn at that time and darn his socks so he could go over. So when he got over there, then I would send him warm things for his feet. And at that time they were called mucklucks. These big knit things, that went up to here. And he would wear them when he came in at night.
What scared you most about him being gone?
What?
What
Pardon?
scared you most about him being gone?
Well, for fear that the war would start up again.
How did you feel seeing him the first time? Tell the story.
When I met him the first time?
No,
when
you saw
he came
him
home.
the first time.
Okay, this wasn't fair. He went in with this one fellow, and when he came home from boot camp, they both had the same amount of days off, which I think was maybe about 10 days off. But the one guy got to fly home, and Grandpa, or George, had to take a train home. So he was shorted a day coming and 2 days getting out back to California. That wasn't fair. But when I met him down at the old train depot down in St. Paul, which is now being renovated, and it's a big deal now, and he picked me right up out of my shoes. And he had a little sister at the time, I remember, and she said, I'm going to get to him first, I'm going to kiss him first, and she ran way ahead, so I just waited until his mom and dad and his brother had, said hello, and then he picked me right up. So.
Tell us the story of how he proposed to you, and how many days after it happened when he came back.
Oh, well, we kind of had taken it for granted when he was in boot camp that he was saving his money. And this is funny, I was just reading some of his old letters. He was putting $35 a month away to buy my ring. $35, but I don't know how much he made at the time. It was probably only 100 or 200 or something like that, So he was putting that away so he could buy me a ring. So I kind of knew I was getting the ring, so.
How many days after he got back did he propose to you?
I think right away, and then we went to the cabin with my, his mom and dad, and we spent, because it was June, and we spent the time up there. I got a vacation from work, and we spent the time at the cabin. Got so sunburned and everything, but all the time you're thinking he's going to leave.
Also, he did it before he left.
So then we picked the wedding date up right away. We figured out how long he'd be gone, and he came home. He spent one Christmas away. And then he was home right before the second Christmas, and then we got married the next June. So,
And then when was Chuck born?
a year after.
A year after that?
Yeah.
And
reading his letters over, a few of his letters over, he said the 2 boys we're going to have, so I don't know where your mother came from.
As you in bed.
And yeah, ended up with 2 boys and 3 girls.
Do you want to show us some of the artifacts that he...
Well, halfway through, these are some of his letters, and I have them tied up, but they're private. They're just for me only, and only part of them, only very, very small part of them. But halfway through his time over in Korea, they had what they called R&R, and it meant rest and recuperation, and he was sent to Japan, and that was like maybe about 10 days of. They played golf and did things, and this was one of the things he sent me home was this purse. And then he also sent home a complete set of china And when it arrived, of course, this was before plastic and the little pellets, you know, the little that you pack in. This whole set arrived in a huge wooden crate packed with straw, and there wasn't a single piece that was broken or chipped or anything, and it was just huge, the whole thing. But it's a treasure. It's a treasure, this whole set.
Did he tell you how much that cost?
No, he didn't. The only thing I remember was that I was supposed to get a string of pearls because they could get pearls over there real reasonable. So he had sent when this other fellow was going to, is this Nortaki? I can't see what it says now here. But he had sent the money with this other fellow when he went on rest and recuperation, and the fellow spent the money. So I never got my pearls, which I was going to wear at the wedding, and I never did get the pearls, so I always reminded him about that. I don't think he ever got the money back either from the fellow.
Do you want to show us a picture of him?
I could show him a picture. He looks so young here. He looks so very, very young. This is a picture of him.
Oh.
And those are his induction papers and everything are in there. And then they did a lot, in Korea they did a lot on silk. Here's all his stripes and everything that he had, and all as he advanced in rank. I saved them from his letters, you know, as he wrote his return addresses, he advanced in rank. But anyway, they had pictures painted on silk, and they were big silk scarves. Well, I didn't know what I was going to use the scarves for, so way afterward I cut them, and this was my graduation picture, and I think you have that at home, Jacqueline. This is my graduation picture from school, and this was a picture of him when he was in boot camp. And they're kind of remarkable. This is what it was painted from, and so it's kind of remarkable.